Right, okay, so some of the characteristics of assessment for learning then, again we'll just go through these, some of them we've already mentioned. So this is from the paper from Samble, which is updated from the 2012 work, or 2011 work. This colour of this slide is appalling, so I'm sure you won't be able to see it. I shall change this. So we've already talked about what we mean by authentic. We need to balance summative and formative assessment. Okay, so we need to make sure that there's sufficient assessment for the formative part where students actually get to practice and improve before the final summative assessment. Opportunities for experimentation. So how often do students get to try stuff out and fail before they get to their final summative point? Okay, so whatever it is, whether it's a practical skill, whether it's a essay writing, whether it's a project, how much time do they get to experiment with ideas and get feedback on those, but they don't actually contribute to their final grade? And I think that's where, you know, where because of time constraints and bigger class sizes, we don't spend enough energy on that. Well-designed and planned feedback. We're going to spend this afternoon talking about feedback. I think feedback's one of those things, if you speak to students, they say their feedback was rubbish and they didn't get any feedback. If you speak to staff, they say, I spend all my time writing feedback and nobody ever reads it or nobody ever acts on it. Does that sound familiar to you?
Very.
Yes, yes. So we'll kind of explore that discourse and see why that's actually happening. And then thinking about opportunities for informal feedback. So where do you get to interact with students and provide informal feedback on their learning? You know, on a one-to-one basis as part of the class, and how do students know that that's feedback? And that can be very simple, saying, "Well, let me give you some feedback on that task that you're doing," and then, "All right, okay, this is feedback." You know, whereas if you just do it without giving that bit of preempt, then they don't realise it's the feedback. So, so there's some little sort of conversational tricks that can help us with that. Did anybody got any comments on any of those? Do they, even if you can't see them, they kind of resonate with you? So, again, we've got this lovely diagram where we're trying to think about whose was this diagram that I keep using? Oh, there you are. It's now starring in my presentation. We're trying to generate all of these kind of diverse skills. So we need complex assessment tasks to be able to capture these things. We know that if we don't put things into assessment tasks, students don't focus their energy on them. So if we want them to become leaders, team workers, use technology, have social skills, have moral and ethical skills, be responsible, where are we putting that in the assessment tasks? Yeah? If you're just asking them to write an essay on a topic, you're going to capture very few of these. The tasks need to be engaging and meaningful. Okay, so again, this comes back to the authentic tasks, things that kind of capture their imagination. If you ask students, they do actually quite like assessments where it's just a multiple choice and just kind of a dumping of knowledge, or a lot of students do, because they don't have to kind of engage too deeply with it. They can just take a very service approach. But actually, if you really engage them with the process, they do end up enjoying that kind of thing a lot more, as long as the assessment process is transparent to them. If you're getting them to do, and we'll hopefully we'll have time to do a few activities this afternoon or later on this morning, where the assessment criteria are deliberately vague, and you'll realise how frustrating that is. So the task itself can be engaging, but you can be turned off from it if the assessment criteria aren't transparent to you. Original assessment kind of tries to fight against kind of plagiarism and essay mills and all of those kind of things. If you're always generating original assignments, if you can modify each assignment for the student so each one is slightly different, and depending on your discipline, that can be achieved. You can do it in sort of computing and engineering problems quite easily, where you just kind of change the parameters slightly, so every student generates a different result in mathematical problems. So that way you sort of stop students copying each other directly. They have to reflect real world activity. So that, again, this idea, and this kind of links to the stuff we were talking about yesterday about their employability. If they're actually being able to demonstrate those employability skills within the assessment, they're developing those and getting them ready for work. Yep.
I mean, it's actually a rhetorical question, but one of the problems that I'm facing with my students is, even though they admit that the assessment is engaging, if they're employed, they approach it in a very transactional manner.
Right.
They're not really engaged.
Right.
Because they don't have the time to devote to it.
Right.
How do we deal with that? Because that's a big problem. Employment is a big problem.
Right.
So as soon as they find any type of employment,
Right.
whether it's within their own field or not, that takes paramount importance in their lives.
Yeah.
That takes priority.
Yeah.
So that whatever you try to do to engage them,
Yeah.
even if it's a finishing project,
Yeah.
even if it's a PhD dissertation,
Yeah.
they're really very disengaged.
Yeah.
And they try to delegate the work to somebody else.
Yeah. I think that we have to understand, and I think that whole kind of time management for both ourselves and our students is something that we will come back to during the course of today. And it's really sort of focusing their energy in terms of the task. And I know it's going to be a challenge because your students have work, they have family lives, they have all these other commitments, and you can't always engage them with the tasks. I mean, I don't think all you can do is create an engaging task, an engaging activity. Make sure it's very focused on what it is that you want them to achieve, so they're not doing superfluous things just for the sake of it. You know, so you're sort of focusing their energies on the key parts that you want them to learn. I think that's a really important question, and I think as we go through the day, you'll maybe be able to extract some things out of it that can help you with that. But I mean, at the end of the day, people are working, and they're working 40 hours a week, and they're trying to do an assignment. Then it's could be really, really difficult. I did a master's in research ethics part-time, and I could do all of the the taught modules, but my dissertation part, because you just needed to focus your mind on it completely, and because you're working, it's really, really difficult. And the only way I actually completed it was I kind of took 3 weeks leave and just sat down and did it. Because every time I came to it, you were just like rereading all the stuff that you'd ever done, So I think you need to speak to students, especially if they're, it's a postgraduate and they're leaving, can they block out some time to do this before they go to get work? Because otherwise, as you say, it's really, really difficult. And as soon as you leave it for a couple of weeks, you're back. You're not back to square one, but it takes you so long to get back to where you were to get your mind thinking what the thought process was, particularly for capstone projects and postgraduate projects. Okay, so I did this again, just revising where we were, because the model that we had last semester about understanding what promotes successful learning, at the heart of it is students wanting and needing to learn, actually doing stuff, having time to make sense of what they're learning, getting feedback, getting opportunities to talk about learning, and then the assessment process. And the reason I'm bringing this back up now is just to kind of remind you that if your assessment is to promote learning, it has to be achieving all of these things, okay? Just because it's the assessment, it doesn't mean say we can forget about these. So obviously in an exam situation, they don't get much time to talk about the question. They might talk about it with their friends after the exam and go, oh my God, wasn't that awful, what did you do? A little bit of opportunity then. How much feedback do you get on exam papers? There's certainly not much desire to learn the topics, for that kind of strategic brain dumping. And then secondly, thinking about the knowledge and skills and behaviours that we want students to develop. If we want them to develop these, then they have to be part of the assessment. So this really is just slides, just sort of summarising, if you keep your mind focused on this when you're designing assessments, that you're trying to promote learning, so you need to be doing these things, and you want your assessment to capture these things. Okay? Simple. So I'll just go through, how many of you use a summative exam that is time limited, unseen exam paper, so you come sit in a large hall, you get exam paper presented in front of you, and you have 2 hours or 3 hours to complete those questions. Closed book, so you can't have it open to resources. You put your hand up if you use those type of assessments. Huh? Huh? Everybody? Is there anybody not use those type of assessments?
Well,
One.
Mixed.
Yeah, but not solely, but you use it at some point.
We use them.
I use the open file,
Open book.
or I allow students to prepare cheat sheets.
Yeah, okay.
But the prerequisite is that they should write with their own handwriting.
Yes, yes.
And
Yeah. So they have a set amount of paper that they can bring in. Yes, one
I
page,
don't
double
allow
page.
photocopies,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
while writing,
yeah,
they learn something.
yeah. Okay, so but the majority of you use a kind of closed book, time limited, unseen exam at some point in your assessment. So if we just review that. We talked about this, do you remember when you listened to the podcast, that approach really encourages this very strategic approach to learning. They might look at past exam papers and guess what type of questions you're going to 21st century that we're really not capturing in that environment. So, no one's ever going to do an exam again. So last time we did review these things, didn't we? And we sort of thought, right, even different types of summative exams, some might be essays, and we could sort of think about whether they meet these criteria. Don't tend to be terribly manageable because they're quite long to read. You've got like 100 essays to read. The criteria sometimes can be a little bit unclear to students. Depends on how much information you give them. Essay type questions. If you've got good criteria, then they can be reasonably reliable. But again, it's quite a challenge for two people to read the same essay and come within 5 or 10%. It depends on what your learning outcomes are. They might hit some learning outcomes in terms of knowledge and recall, but all of those other learning outcomes, those higher, more complex outcomes, very unlikely you're going to reach those. Similarly, short questions, maybe slightly more manageable, but still addresses the same problems. If it's if it's all problem-solving, calculation-based, you might be able to improve some of these things. If that's the discipline that you're teaching is around, engineering, design, the sciences, mathematics, where students are addressing a problem and solving it. You can increase some of these, but still, it's still that kind of brain dump idea that doesn't capture what you're doing. I'm going to come back to that one later. Right, so this is just summing up really everything that we've said, or I've said this morning. And we're going to come back this afternoon to this sort of holistic approach, where you look at all of the assessment across your modules. How many different types of assessment, summative assessment, do you have in your modules? Do you just have
quiz, midterm, and final exams? Actually, these are compulsory. The institutions want us to, at the end of the semester, submit 3 written exams.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's half the problem. That when we said before, one of those other slides about the tradition, the academic tradition, if you don't have a final written exam, how do you know that the student really did the work? So I think that remains a challenge, and I think we have to change some of the mindset. Do you have any control over how much weight that final exam has? Right. Minimum 40%.
Yes.
Yeah.
The final has to be 40%, and the mid-semester work has to be 60%.
Right.
In
Okay.
our institution.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So you've got some work to do.